Good morning. Welcome to your Sunday morning, early morning intuitive guidance. I'm Dr. Bonnie Nussbaum. Looking forward to sharing today's card because it really opens a door for us for some personal growth here. So, 6:13 in the morning. We got done last night on the Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within at 11:24. Good morning, Abigail. Glad you are here. Welcome, welcome. So I'm operating on about 5 hours of sleep. Good morning, Cindy. Welcome. It's so high energy, though, that you kind of have this reserve of energy you can draw on. Thank you for the sunrise. Very pretty. Awesome. Yep, he was making up for the night before when he let us off a little bit early. Good morning, Susan. Welcome. And I want to share a couple stories from yesterday because they were eye-opening to me, heart-opening, soul-opening, etc. So, but first I'm going to show you the card, but let's do our breaths first. Nice deep breath in and out. And in and out. Again, I can't overemphasize how important the breathing is. Good morning, Bonnie. Glad you are here. Welcome, welcome. You're up early. Breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Speaking of early, there were some people on the call yesterday from Australia. It was quite different timing there compared to us. So we did, I think we started at 9 yesterday morning. We finished at 11:24 last night. We did actually have a couple of breaks yesterday. So today's the last day. I'm looking forward to this. Yesterday, as I said, was Transformation Day. Amazing stuff transpired. And so one of the things I'd like us to do today, I'll give you our card in a minute, but I'd like you to be thinking about the stories you tell yourself. Good morning, Gwen. Glad you're here. And the stories you tell other people about you. And we're so facile with our storytelling that we don't even realize we're in the story. So I'm going to give you some ideas in terms of how to figure out that you're in the story and how that story might keep you stuck. So first rule of thumb I'm going to tell you is if you hear yourself saying something more than once, it has now become a story. All right, so let's start with our card, though, which comes from, and this was interesting, I was muscle testing to see which pile we were going to be in, and it was the right-hand pile, and the count just kept going and got way down by the bottom, and out come the original angel cards. I don't know about for you, but way back when these first came out, they were like a boon to therapists because people would put them all in a bowl and mix them up and then have a client pick one out and then talk about what that stirred for them. So they were a very interesting invention to help therapists working with clients. The card industry has certainly taken off way since, but that was part of the beginning. Good morning, Lucy. Welcome. Glad you are here. So our word for today, and it's going to be very hard to see the little diagram, but it's support. And it's one angel giving another angel a foot up over a brick wall. Support. Support. So let me read the card first. Stay connected and let others in. Widen your channel of receiving and giving. Reach out with encouragement and be versatile and timely in your resourcefulness. So I have lots to say about this. Lots, lots, lots. Hold on to your butts. Here we go. So the first thing that comes to mind is support. How do we offer support to each other? Especially as women, how do we offer support? And I witnessed two interactions yesterday with Tony Robbins that blew my mind and helped me appreciate how skilled and gifted he is at his craft. And I want to share both of those with you because I think there's something to be learned from each one. Good morning, Beth. Glad you are here. He talked about women having a tendency toward being very supportive of each other when we're in groups, like our Practical Rebels group, right? Being very supportive. But The downside of that support can be that we may not feel comfortable with or have the facility with kindly and lovingly calling each other out on our bullshit. So, the two things that occurred yesterday, the first one was like, ooh, wow, that was really interesting. And then the second one was like, blow my mind, amazing. So the first one was, there's 11,000 people at this event live in Dallas. There's 3,000 of us on Zoom, but there's 11,000 people live. First of all, can you imagine 11,000 people in the same place? And he's doing his thing and going along and teaching and all this stuff, and some lady raises her hand, and she's like way in the middle of the crowd, and they usually would take a microphone to somebody. And so they did, and she said that she wanted a hug from Tony Robbins. And he set a beautiful boundary with that. He said, I appreciate that you want a hug from me and that you're here and that you're trying to get your needs met, etc. And he goes, there's 11,000 people here. And if I hug you, what's going to happen? Good morning, Cheryl. Welcome. I'm going to have a dozen more, and I know it'd be way more than that, who do the same thing that you just did. Interrupt the flow of the process to get your needs met. He didn't shame her. He explained to her that he would connect with her at some point later. Good morning, Mary. Welcome. It was masterful how he didn't destroy this woman in the process, even though most of us would consider what she did rude and selfish. But he works very hard to stay out of judgment and was assisting us in staying out of judgment also. Thank you for the coffee. And so he had talked earlier that day about, was it that day or yesterday? Whatever. Anyway, it must have been that day. 6 motivations that people have, things that drive them, the need for significance, the need for certainty, the need for variety, etc., etc. And so then he used this as a teaching point in terms of helping us understand what might have been driving her behavior, that need for significance and some need for certainty there. So that was the one event, and I was like, wow, he handled that really well. Then we get to this other point where we had done some work in breakout rooms, or they clustered in groups of 3 at the event, and he was asking for feedback. So this one woman raised her hand, and we were basically working on the stories we tell ourselves that get us in trouble. Okay, the stories we tell ourselves that get us in trouble. One of mine was, we had to do 3 of them. One of mine was, I don't fit in. And then we would write down how that storyline has cost us over time. Recognizing we create those storylines as a self-protective thing, but we also tend to create them when we're children and not totally thinking as clearly as we hopefully do when we're adults. Not all of us. Anyway, this young woman takes the microphone and she says, my father doesn't love me. Tears up, she's crying, blah, blah, blah. So Tony starts asking questions. What led her to believe that her father didn't love her? And she says, he didn't come to my wedding. And the whole crowd goes, oh. And Tony asks more questions. Come to find out, the gist was, good morning, Debbie, glad you are here. Her parents were divorced. Her father lives in another country. He's remarried and has a child, another child. This woman is 32. So she was, her mother, negotiating with family. How do you do a wedding when you have divorced parents and there's the discomfort of the various people, right? And so she's telling her story, and he keeps stopping her and asking about points in the story, because the story obviously at that point had become well rehearsed. We tell our story, and we tell our story in a favorable light for us, right? So as he's working this through, he comes to the point where he very clearly says to her, You made a choice. You made a choice to invite your mother, to disinvite your father by indicating that his new wife was not allowed at your wedding, and then wondered why he chose not to come. And walked her through it, had her kind of step into her father's experience, and by the end, in front of 11,000 people, he had told her not to call him anymore. He had blocked her on Facebook, etc., etc. That all became part of the story in terms of what a bad guy he was. And Tony really flipped it around so that she could step in and see how hurt he was also. He's her father, he's disinvited to her wedding, etc. And he's saying, Tony Robbins is saying, nobody's bad people here. Nobody is bad people here. This is just the difficult life situations we have to deal with. So, in front of 11,000 people, he has her call her father. It's 1 o'clock where her father lives, a.m. So he didn't answer, but she left a message, and Tony then took the phone and left a message for her to her dad. And part of the story was, he said to her, tell him that if he doesn't call you back, you're going to show up on his doorstep one day. And she goes, kind of like, he's way in the place that he lives. And he's like, take a plane. But he worked with her so beautifully. And the rest of us were, because there's the chat on Zoom. So I'm watching all the messages flying past on Zoom. She's such an entitled whatever, blah, blah. You know, a lot of judgment, either about her or about her father. No, he's the asshole, blah, blah, blah. Again, pitting people against each other. Instead of, how do we bring this together? How do we talk through these wounded places? Because this is what happens with people, right? We hurt each other's feelings. We don't mean to, but we hurt each other's feelings. And sometimes we're being kind of assholey, and we do intend to hurt somebody's feelings. We still need to apologize. So he had her apologize for her part in this drama, and it was a drama, and explained to her that how she had dealt with her father was how she was probably dealing with her new husband. And if she didn't want to end up in divorce court, this had to change. He was masterful. He was kind, he was loving, he was humorous, but he held her feet to the fire in terms of her behavior. Do we do that for each other? Do we love each other enough that we're willing to hold each other's feet to the fire when we're not showing up in our best light? When we're being petty, when we're being crabby, when we're being whatever we're being? Do we hold each other accountable, or do we let people off the hook and we don't serve them? We don't serve them by doing that. When we hear the story that someone's telling and we don't ask those questions, or when we have a discomfort with it. So I'm going to make one up here. Yeah, my husband came home from work and he was just all crabby, and I was like, who the hell do you think you are? And, you know, we stomped around all night and blah, blah, blah. Instead of me saying, oh, that must have really sucked for you, I'm so sorry, maybe holding her accountable for her behavior. Do you have a sense of why you think he was? Well, yeah, he had a horrible day at work and his boss is a jerk and he's exhausted and he wrecked his shoulder and blah, blah. Okay. Are you giving him any grace for all of what he's carrying right now? No, I guess I'm not. Okay, what could you do to kind of give him some grace for what all he's carrying right now? Okay, maybe I could do X. Kindly and lovingly hold each other accountable. When we have a thought in our head, you know, I'm kind of processing this way. Okay if I give you some feedback on this? when we hold each other accountable to a higher standard, when we hold ourselves accountable to a higher standard. Good morning, Bobby, welcome. When we don't allow ourselves to get caught in our storytelling that makes us look like the shining example or the victim or whatever it is, whatever role we tend to play, and we do take the time to get past our begrudgingness and step into someone else's shoes and try to take good care of us, but also give the other person some grace. If you guys get Heather Cox Richardson's emails, her whole email about November 11th, yesterday, Armistice Day, was about this kind of thing on a grand scale, about war and the end of war, and how the end of war is the opportunity to foster more and more peace, and how repeatedly, World War I, World War II, certainly right now, we have squandered those opportunities. We've dropped the ball in terms of moving out of a warlike structure and into a more supportive structure, if you want to call it support. So what else do I want to say about that? There's so much to say. I'd like you to look at yourself in terms of, when haven't you been the best friend? When haven't you pointed out to someone you love, hey, I'm noticing something. Can I give you some feedback? I'm wondering if you realize what the fallout from your choices here is likely to be. I think if we were trained to do this, and that's one of the reasons I love when we're working in Taking the War Out of Your Words, because she gives us the words. She helps us know, what do we say? And Tony Robbins did that yesterday with this young woman. He gave her the words to say. It's one thing to say, you need to make amends with your father. It's another thing to say, Dad, I'm sorry. I made a poor choice. I wish I had put it out there to all of you, that you're all invited to my wedding. You all have to work it out in terms of how you're going to get along. I'm not the one who got the divorce. You guys are the ones who got the divorce. I'm putting it in your lap. I want all of you at my wedding. You're all invited. Figure it out. So then at the end, they always have entertainment. This guy isn't entertainment. He is very entertaining, but he has a huge story to share. His name is John Dorenbos. He's a former football player. He's a magician. He is amazing, and his story is amazing. Look him up. It's Dorenbos. And there's some Facebook video or YouTube videos. He was on Ellen DeGeneres. He was on America's Got Talent. Very self-deprecating, very humorous. So he talks about making it to the finals on America's Got Talent and getting beaten by an 11-year-old with a ukulele. It was Grace whatever her name is, Grace Vanderwall. There it is. And then he goes, but then I got called back to be on like the master one, and I got beaten by a 14-year-old with a puppet. So he's very humorous, but the gist of his story is how we need to rise up. We need to transcend the difficult things in our lives. And we all have those stories, right? I've got that story that I told, well, I can't do this because of this, and I can't do that because of that, and I can't do this because of this. And people from the outside looking at me would say, well, you've accomplished a lot of stuff in your life. True. But how much more could I have accomplished had I not been telling myself that bullshit story of what I can't do? So this dude, here's his story. He loved baseball. And so he was very into baseball. And growing up, typical house, parents, sister, blah, blah, blah. And one day he's at his friend's house and the phone rings, and he's told that his dad has bludgeoned his mother to death in the garage. the whole world shifts, right? So they ended up living with his mom's sister, he and his sister living with his mom's sister, and being in the courtroom the whole trial. And their therapist actually gave them the opportunity to look at the autopsy photographs. The child protective person was like, I cannot believe you're doing this to these kids. But he put the file on the table and he said to them, somewhere down the line, you may decide to have interaction with your father. He was going to prison, obviously. But you may decide, and I want you to make that choice from an informed place. So here are the autopsy photos. You can look at them, you can not look at them. It's whatever you choose to do. They chose to look, and he worked them through the process of dealing with all of the emotions that they had about that. And so on we go, and this guy's he's doing card tricks, I'm going to call them tricks, while he's telling the story, and the story fits with the cards. It was utterly amazing. And he talks about his wife and his daughter and his whole story, and how he was the longest, he was the guy who holds the ball to snap it to the kicker, and that he got paid the most doing that for a short period of time. He's very self-deprecating, so he'd put out there all these accolades, and then he'd kind of explain the context of them. Because again, story. What's the story we're telling? End of story is he ended up having to quit football. He got traded away, which was a mind-boggler. But again, he said, the faster you can adjust to this is my reality. Not fighting it, not saying it shouldn't be this way, how could they trade me after all these years, blah, blah, blah. And what happened was, before he even started playing, he had his physical, and they discovered that his aorta had a big bulge in it, which kills many people. So his football career was done. 2 days later, he had open heart surgery. Good morning, Carolyn. Welcome. So how do you adjust to these things that happen in life? How do you turn them into gifts? So he turned the trading of him as a football player to the other team to saving his life. Because if he hadn't had that physical, he probably would have died on the football field. Etc., etc., etc. All of the things that happen to us that are actually happening for us. Can you reframe it? Can you look at it differently? Here's your challenge for today, should you choose to accept it. Can you take the stories you tell, inject some honesty in them, and rewrite the script? Rewrite the script. So that young woman, her story was, my father doesn't love me. When she injected reality into it, I made a choice to not invite my father's new wife and son to my wedding, which then led to my father choosing not to come, which then led to me writing this story that created more and more alienation. When she began to own her shit, everything changed. I challenge you to claim your stories. What are you saying? What is really honestly true about that story? And what aspects are you leaving out? What is your responsibility in that story? Okay? I think especially for divorce situations, what was your part in the game? Don't play the victim. What was your part in that game? We all had a part in that game. So yes, my husband had an affair. I was not home much. I worked my ass off. I was building, we had the massive house, we had, all this stuff. I was putting my time there. We had 2 kids. When I came home, I was putting my time with them. He was kind of left in the dust. No wonder it didn't work out. No wonder. So I am not telling the story that he's the bad guy. We both had our part in that process. What are you willing to own? What are you willing to own? And how will it set you free? When you change that story, when you go from the victim story or the righteously indignant story or the whatever storyline is there, when you change your story, how will it set you free? Have an awesome day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Remember, you're capable of far more than you think you are. Bye-bye.